Paul Ryan was called out this weekend for, well, semi called out, right? I don't think this is a real calling out, but he was called out for attempting to repeal Obamacare while having absolutely nothing to replace it with. Now, the truth of the matter is, this is not new. This is exactly what they've been doing and trying to do since 2010, since the day it passed. They have been trying to repeal Obamacare and have absolutely nothing to replace it with. So Paul Ryan was on Face the Nation with John Dickerson on yesterday, and I have a clip of it, but I think the problem is YouTube is crashing for some people, and for others it's playing. So yeah, it's
you said you wanted,
all I can get from this is the audio. So I'm just going to play the audio from Paul Ryan. I can't get any video from YouTube. So here's Paul Ryan on Face the Nation discussing the repeal of Obamacare. Here we go.
you said you wanted the Republicans to offer an alternative to the president. One of the first things you did this year, though, was offer that repeal. How is that an alternative?
It's just not. That's why we have to come up with an alternative. So you're right about that.
Will you do that? There will be
yeah.
a bill that will come out of the House voted on with all.
My goal, I don't know how far it will go, given the fact that we have a filibuster and a guy named Obama who's not going to replace Obamacare. But my goal is that we, as Republicans, if we don't like these laws, don't like the direction the country's going, I think we have to be more than just an opposition party. We have to be a proposition party. So if we don't like this, we got to show how we would do things differently. And we really think Obamacare is failing, whether it's premiums, restricted access, higher deductibles, families losing the insurance that they wanted to keep. And that's happening all across the country. People are hurting, and we need to offer a solution. So yes, on this and many other issues, we need to offer alternatives. And that's
all right, that's enough. All right, so this was him on Face the Nation this weekend. They have nothing to replace Obamacare with. They have had 8 years to come up with something to replace Obamacare with, and they have come up with absolutely nothing. So they're okay with repealing Obamacare and having nothing to replace it with, so long as they can replace Obamacare, right? It's the proverbial horse before the cart, or cart before the horse, or whichever one is the wrong way around. That's what they've been doing, right? And somehow this makes sense to them that they should get rid of Obamacare without even offering or having something on the plate to replace it with. That's because there is nothing to replace it with, unless you're going to talk about the single payer system, which we will get to Hillary Clinton and her thing today. We'll talk about that in a second. But first, another attempt to repeal Obamacare with nothing to replace it with. I'll give Jeb Bush this. Jeb Bush is one of the only candidates, only Republican for that matter, to offer up an actual alternative to Obamacare. Back in October, I think around October 15th, he released his policy, his plan on replacing Obamacare. And economists said across the board that it will cut cost. But just because you cut costs doesn't mean that you're actually going to get something better. And I think that's a misnomer. That's a misconception, rather, that is prevalent in Republican circles, right? As long as we cut costs, that's all that matters. Never mind the fact that it's going to be detrimental to most of Americans, particularly in more impoverished Americans, right? So, but at least Jeb Bush offered something. Here is the Speaker of the House. Here is the Republican caucus in the House for the last 6 years trying, I think at least 40 times they've passed legislation to repeal Obamacare. Now they have support in the Senate, and they actually passed a bill sent to the President Obama, essentially wasting millions upon millions of dollars that they could have used to try to formulate something better than Obamacare. The problem is, they can't find anything better than Obamacare short of the single payer system. Now, here's a problem with that interview. The problem with that interview is that he allowed Paul Ryan to get away with saying, we want to replace it, but never question him about what they're going to replace it with. It's like this is where logic ends, or this is where journalistic prowess really ends. They ask a question and they're not capable of asking a follow-up. Paul Ryan says, yes, we want to replace it. But here's the thing. You tried to repeal it first. And you've been trying to replace it or repeal it for 6 years and still have. And so the journalist, John Dickerson, just let him get away with this and run off into his talking points. And that's just endemic across the board in media. Instead of asking the most sensible and the most logical follow-up question, which is, if you haven't come up with it yet, what makes you think, or what makes us believe that you're capable of coming up with something? The other thing they don't do is unpack the lies about how Obamacare is failing. I did a video several months ago about Jeb Bush and about how much money he made specifically off of Obamacare. They make Obamacare sound like it's this failing enterprise, that it's crumbling at the seams. It's detrimental to the private sector. It's detrimental to families. It's detrimental to everyone, right? That's the condition that that's the urgency that they try to cape their attempts to repeal Obamacare in, when in reality, many of them, particularly Jeb Bush, are profiting off of Obamacare. Jeb Bush was a board member of Tenet Healthcare, and Tenet Healthcare, as a board member, he had to maintain significant stock in Tenet Healthcare, and that's kind of the structure of board membership. After the full implementation of Obamacare, the stocks that Jeb Bush had in Tenet Healthcare netted him a profit of $500,000. This was after the full implementation, the full rollout around 2014. After the full implementation of Obamacare, Jeb sold his stock in Tenet Healthcare, and he profited about $500,000. So if Obamacare is such a huge burden on the private sector, if Obamacare is this huge detrimental thing to the healthcare industries, it sure as hell is doing really good for people like Jeb Bush and people who own stock in healthcare industries. So as with everything else, this boils back down to the fact that our media are simply not doing their jobs. Like, this is public information. They have access to this as much as I have access to this. And who was that caller last week? There was a caller last week that said that they had been kind of naive because they believed that the media was complicit with, let's say, complicit with whatever, with corporations. And then they realized, after a while, they realized that the media is really co-conspirators, right? They're not just silently and tacitly approving. They're active in this. And part of me believes that this entire thing is nothing more than a game. This entire political argument is nothing more than a game, a very significant game. They're playing with the lives of millions of people. They're playing with the futures of millions of people. But to them, it's nothing more than a game, because the same information that I just gave you about the profit that one of the Republican presidential candidates made off of Obamacare, showing that it is not detrimental to the private sector and that it has been beneficial. Therefore, it has definitely not been detrimental to jobs. They would never ask a substantive question like this, because it would begin to unravel a real conversation as to why are Republicans opposing it in the first place. So no, I don't think that they are ignorant. I don't think that they're tacitly endorsing this type of rhetoric and this type of waste of American tax dollars, repealing and voting to repeal over and over and over again. I think they're just co-conspirators in this political game that never ends. Never ends. So long as they can keep pitting Republicans against Democrats, as long as they can keep doing that, then their ratings stay up and they make more money. And they all make more money playing with the existence and the lives and the futures of hundreds of millions of Americans.